Hi there, I'm Karen O'Connor of SingWise.com. Many singers encounter problems in their singing that are related to an interdependence of function between the hyoid bone, tongue, and jaw. These three parts of the vocal apparatus form a gang, the Troublesome Trio, that like to influence each other in bad ways. When they become too heavily involved with each other, trouble happens. While it is true that the hyoid bone, tongue, jaw complex functions to some extent as an entire unit because these structures are closely connected through the intermingling of musculatures, ligaments, and tissues, if we allow their individual actions to become too enmeshed, if we allow them to influence each other too much, we're going to run into a number of potential problems. These may include both functional and aesthetical problems such as a high larynx position, poor vocal fold closure, a closed throat, problems with diction and articulation, vowel distortions, and tongue and jaw tensions. Unless their functions are separated and they learn how to work in cooperation with each other, they will keep getting us into trouble. Now let me explain briefly how these three became so close to each other and in what ways they influence each other's behavior. The larynx suspends from the hyoid bone, so any action of the hyoid bone, whether it rises or lowers, is going to force a comparable movement of the larynx. So basically, when I'm saying hyoid bone, I'm essentially talking about the larynx because the larynx height follows that of the hyoid bone. The laryngeal elevators, the suprahyoid muscles, are attached to the mandibular, the lower jaw, and mastoidal areas, and to the tongue. So hyoid bone movement is also going to influence the jaw and tongue. The root of the tongue is anchored to the hyoid bone, so any movement of the tongue root is likely transferred to the larynx via the hyoid bone. When the tongue rises for vowels and consonants that are characterized by high tongue postures, so too does the hyoid bone and thus the larynx. And the base of the tongue is tethered to the floor of the mouth, which means that its actions also affect the jaw to some extent. So you can see how, because of their close proximity to each other and this intermingling of their musculatures, ligaments, and tissues, their attachments, the negative or unruly behavior of one member of the troublesome trio can easily cause problems, especially tensions and dysfunctions that spread to the other members of the gang. In this video, I'm going to describe a few of these errors of interdependence and offer some exercises for isolating the functions of the hyoid bone, tongue, and jaw, and then teaching them to play more appropriately with each other. The first problem that I often see is related to the placing of the components of the vocal tract in unnatural or ineffectual postures. There is a broad scope of possible postures and resultant sounds of which the human vocal instrument is capable and that might be considered normal or natural. We can manipulate the shapes of our vocal tracts like we're contortionists. However, not all of these postures are equally advantageous in terms of functional freedom and desirable tone. If we place the components of the vocal tract in unnatural positions that inhibit healthy and efficient phonatory function, this may cause them to overwork, and again, because they're neighbors, this is likely to have a snowball effect on the other components and cause the entire neighborhood to go south. When one muscle group or member is overworking and experiencing tension, it's usually because either it or another member is out of its proper alignment, as when the jaw is thrust forward, or the chin is elevated or lowered excessively. Poor alignment of the cervical spine with the head and the shoulders can also cause our troublesome trio to act up. So, some problems of tension and dysfunction are a result of one member either shirking in its responsibilities or placing another member in a position that's compromising its functional integrity. Now let's examine the hyoid bone, which is a U-shaped bone that supports both the larynx and the tongue. It's located at the front of the neck, around the level of the base of the mandible, the lower jaw, or the third cervical vertebra when at rest. Ideally, its height should be primarily influenced by the infrahyoid muscles that lower it when we yawn and inhale deeply, and the suprahyoid muscles that raise it when we swallow. But the tongue's height can also have an influence on its position. We need to learn how to raise the tongue for vowels and consonants formed with high tongue postures without it tugging up too significantly on the hyoid bone, or else the larynx will rise and the throat will close. We need to separate articulatory actions from laryngeal height. Likewise, we need to learn how to prevent the tongue root from pressing down on the hyoid bone for speech sounds with low and back tongue postures, and also not allow the tongue root to take over the duties of the infrahyoid muscles in stabilizing the larynx in a comfortable position inside the neck. When we inhale deeply through the mouth, we should feel a sense of widening and spaciousness inside the throat as the pharynx dilates and the larynx descends naturally and effortlessly. The tongue should be passive, resting comfortably on the floor of the mouth with its tip behind the lower front teeth and its root released and leaning up against the front wall of the throat. It shouldn't retract, flatten excessively, or dip or trough down the center. If it does, that's a sign of probable tongue tension. Be careful of the directive to use the first part of a yawn to open the throat. It works for some singers, but for others, it's counterproductive and creates tensions and abnormal postures of the larynx and tongue. Again, there should be no active engagement of the tongue when we inhale. There may be a slight pulling down at the back when the hyoid bone descends because of their shared attachment. But again, this is a passive response to the infrahyoid muscles causing the downward hyoid bone movement, not the muscles of the tongue making it happen. Don't engage the tongue root to lower the larynx. We should experience the same sensations of throat opening and lengthening as we inhale deeply through the nose with our mouths closed, though it may not be quite as notable a sensation. Now, this openness and passivity of the tongue is relatively easy to achieve for most singers who don't have unproductive tongue reflexes. Now, let's challenge ourselves a little bit. Lower the jaw and place the tongue in an NG position. Tongue tip behind the lower front teeth and the tongue body raised to meet the front portion of the soft palate so that it doesn't fill up the pharyngeal space. I've recorded an entire video on how to properly form and use the NG tongue posture if you need some more direction with this. Now, inhale deeply through the nose. If your larynx is descending appropriately and your pharynx is widening, you'll feel the same sense of openness, and you'll also feel the tongue root descending along with the hyoid bone. The body of the tongue continues to touch the soft palate, but the back section of the tongue will feel as though it's elongating or stretching as the tongue root descends along with the hyoid bone. If you're used to engaging the tongue root to lower the larynx, the tongue body will probably try to pull away from the soft palate as you inhale deeply. Retrain your tongue over time to behave independently of the actions of the hyoid bone. We should also be able to feel the simultaneous descent of the larynx and the stretch of the tongue when we place it between the lips and inhale. The hyoid bone should lower, bringing the tongue root down along with it, but the tongue body remains forward and wide and passive. Essentially, as we lower the larynx via the infrahyoid muscles, it's paramount that we also release the tongue root so that it doesn't become engaged in the control of laryngeal height. This is often best trained in silence first. I also have a video about restructuring the voice in silence. Also, use a mirror for visual feedback and confirmation that your tongue is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Let's try another exercise to separate tongue and hyoid bone function. First, place the tongue in a post-alveolar N position. N, N, N. Then, raise the rest of the tongue body so that it lines the roof of the mouth. From this position, swallow. This is hard to do when the mouth is slightly open like this. If you've achieved an independence of function between the tongue and the larynx, the tongue will not pull away from this position during the swallow. It will continue to line the roof of the mouth. You'll have to work at transferring this independence to the words that you're singing, ensuring that you're able to produce high-tongued consonants and vowel sounds without it pulling significantly on the hyoid bone. Get the stretch in the back part of the tongue. E, ye. Now let's try a couple exercises for separating the functions of the tongue and jaw. Allow the jaw to hang loosely and comfortably as though you're singing the O vowel but with no rounding of the lips. O. Now this opening should feel really comfortable. Now bring the tip of the tongue up to the alveolar position in order to form a silent L consonant. gently move the tongue up and down, but keep the jaw stable, but not stiff or rigid. It shouldn't be engaged in the movement of the tongue at all, and it shouldn't slide forward or back along with the tongue's movements. Now I'm placing my hand on my jaw to monitor its behavior to see whether or not it's moving up and down along with the tongue, but I'm not using my hand to stop the jaw from moving. That's not going to train the jaw to achieve this independence of function on its own. A mirror can also serve the same purpose. Now, voice the sound. Don't over-articulate. Keep the jaw released and let all the work of articulation be handled mainly by the tongue tip. Don't choreograph your jaw movement with your tongue movement. La, 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 la. The jaw will open and close in order to form our various speech sounds, and it will open wider for higher pitches and louder singing. That's not a problem, so long as those movements are influenced only minimally by the actions and positions of the tongue. We have to allow for flexible movement. Something that might help here is shaping the mouth and positioning the jaw for the vowel, pitch, and dynamic as you're forming your consonant sound. So let's take the NG, and I want to sing an after it. I'm forming it for the So let's try an exercise that uses this NG combination. I'm going to watch myself in the mirror that I have on my wall over here so that I can monitor my jaw's behavior, my tongue's behavior, and ensure that I am separating their functions, that I'm not jawing my diction, and that I'm allowing the articulation, the work of articulation, to be handled mainly or almost exclusively by the back of the tongue as it separates from the soft palate and rises back up. Relatively stable, it's not sliding forward and it's not moving up and down along with all the tongue movement. There's a little bit more opening as I sing the higher pitches and a little bit more closing as I sing the lower pitches, but that's perfectly normal. This will economize the movements of your jaw and save its muscles some energy. We don't want to expend any more energy than is necessary by performing unnecessary actions. So again, don't hold your jaw stiff and immobile, but economize its movements as much as you can. Don't jaw your diction. Now, try forming the N and D sounds without engaging the jaw unnecessarily. Na, 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 da, 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 da. Finally, try the same thing with the hard G and K sounds. Ga, 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 ga. This is harder because most of us use our jaws to pull the tongue away from the soft palate, but we have to let the tongue assume this responsibility all on its own. You'll probably feel the muscles underneath the chin here engaging as the tongue moves up and down. These are the suprahyoid muscles, and they're affected by and assist tongue movement. So some movement is fine, but this area should remain soft and flexible and not become stiff and tense, and we shouldn't see or feel this whole area pressing downward. If we do, it's a sign of tension at the base of the tongue. This kind of work is going to help you separate the functions of the tongue and jaw. As we're working through song lyrics, we may have to practice speaking them first very slowly, ensuring that we don't allow the hyoid bone tongue-jaw complex to become inappropriately engaged in counterproductive behaviors. Then we sing them while paying special attention and trying to achieve an independence of function for each of them. Functions become deeply entangled and habits become deeply ingrained in our technique, and it takes some time and conscious work to help tame this troublesome trio. So I hope these tips and exercises have been helpful for you. Please let me know how you're doing with them, or if you have any further questions or need further guidance, leave some comments or questions in the comment section below, or you can message me on the SingWise Facebook page or email me at Karen@singwise.com, and I'll do my very best to answer your questions and help guide you. And as always, please like this video and subscribe to this channel so that you'll receive notifications when I post new videos. Thank you so much for tuning in.